She came in the door screaming and yelling, "You did it. It's your fault because they came after me." Who? Those girls. They just came after me. And David said, "I told you, you beat them up. If they do it, they deserve it. You beat them up." And she said, I can't do that. And so he said, Bill was the cowboy we knew, are going to show you how to do that. So they taught her how to fight off people.
How to defend herself?
Yeah,
Wow.
they really
Okay.
literally did. A couple days later, she came home from school and she smiled. And I said, uh-oh, now what?
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Legends of Zegan, and I am really excited because I have a really special guest with me here today. I have known this guest for a couple of years now almost, and we met through a club called Toastmasters, and I'm really pleased to introduce you all to none other than Dr. Blair Revak. Blair, how are you doing today?
Hey, hi, good to see you. Gee whiz, I am doing fine. I have been anxious about what I'm going to be seeing with all these flashing lights, and hope to hopefully share a lot of fun with you.
Yes, I'm really excited. We've actually attempted this podcast once before, and
Yes.
we ran into some audio issues, so we are redoing it, and we're going to do it better the second time because last time we got into so many amazing stories of your life, your accomplishments, and that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is because Legends of Zegan, we highlight everyday heroes, people who have been up to big things in life, giving back to their communities, and people who have overcome adversity. And honestly, Blair, I think you check every single one of those boxes. So
I'm working on it.
yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely doing big things in life. Even today, you accomplished a lot in your life. So we'll dive into that. But, first off, I just want to understand, you are a doctor. You practiced medicine for many years. And so let's talk about that a little bit. So when and where did you start becoming a doctor?
Where and when did I start becoming a doctor?
Yes.
Is actually when I was about 12 years old. It happened in the basement of my family home. I was down in the basement, found a mouse trap and found that there was a dead mouse in the mouse trap, and decided I was going to dissect this mouse and see what was going on. So it was an exploratory trip. I was excited because I had the whole animal right there. When I cut it open, I was shocked to find that there was a dead babies inside
Wow.
this mouse. And so not only did I discover a little mouse, I discovered her fit babies, and said, as I ran up the step to my father, I said, Dad, look at this. This is so cool. I'm going to be a doctor. And my dad, who is very serious and who is very cautious and who doesn't take any risks in any life, says, I don't think so. And I said, what do you mean? I can be a doctor. And he said, who's going to pay for it? And I said, we'll figure that out. Don't worry, Dad. I'm gonna be a doctor. That was not spoken about for several years then. I was in high school, I was in college, and I always had at the bottom of the list doctor. But because Dad had said we couldn't afford it, it was on the bottom of the list. However, that changed when I was able to go to medical school and get financial support. They even found some financial support for missionaries. And when they said to me, are you a missionary? I was like, well, depends how you define it, but it was financial aid that got me into the college. So I went for it, and thankfully it all worked out well.
Wow. That's an interesting journey, going from dissecting a mouse at a very young age. Most kids would run away screaming from a mouse, but you were curious, and that led to you going down this path, determined you really wanted to go to medical school. You wanted to become a doctor, and then you did. You went to school. You practiced medicine for quite a few years, right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
And now you currently reside in Arizona,
Right.
but you grew up on the East Coast then?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Pennsylvania was our resident home. And Then in college, which was in Pennsylvania, Susquehanna University, David and I met and decided that we had something to share with each other. He was already signed on as a financial aid graduate or a financial graduate, and when the dean saw him and he had absolutely no money, one of the deans came forward and helped him with supporting him financially. So we were very fortunate that we had good contacts with lots of wonderful people who helped us get through all of that preparation and an opportunity to practice medicine. So we practiced medicine in Pennsylvania for 10 years
Mhm.
and then decided David was so busy delivering babies and doing healthcare that we hardly had time to do anything else. And I said to him, I read an article in the paper in the medical journal that they were looking for doctors to fill in for doctors who needed a break on the reservation. And I always told you I wanted to be working on a reservation. And David, of course, said, yes, I remember that story too. And so we began looking into the reservation experience 10 years after we were in the private practice experience.
Okay. I want to focus on your kind of your passion or desire to work on the reservation with Native
Yeah.
Americans, with those people. Why? Why did you have this strong desire to do that? Did you read about it in a magazine one time, or what led you to want to do that?
Well, I find it interesting that when you find yourself engaged in an issue and you start down that path, you really have to complete it, is kind of how I would say I looked at it all. Why did I at 12 or 13 think I should be a doctor? I don't know, but it was very clear in my mind that that's what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
And I cannot give you a person. I can give you a person I met when I was in medical school. The chief of surgery shared stories of having volunteered on the reservation. So I overheard his stories and began to follow him, and I learned that not only was he a wonderful, heroic man, but he loved working on the reservation. So he became kind of my guideline. But is there any other story or miraculous occasion? No, and I think that's what we all have to keep in our mind is that who knows when someone will walk by that you ignore, but maybe they have something to share.
I love that. And
Yeah,
you just kind of tuned into that with that uh, surgeon who was sharing his story, and
yeah.
for you it was kind of this light bulb moment, or was
Abs
it just like you took it in and it went to the back of your mind, but it was always there?
I think that's how I kind of operate. It was always right there waiting, just kind of like the dissection story. It's there, and you start to tell somebody, and you know whether they care or not.
Mm,
But meanwhile, you've planted a little tab of hope for not only yourself but for all the people you're with.
I love that. I think that's neat. And would you consider yourself a curious person?
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting. I'm in a study that Banner is doing on why people get old and how they get old. And I had to answer a whole lot of questions this week. I should have saved a copy for you. And one of them was that very thing.
Really
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay, that's fascinating. I would absolutely agree that I think you are a curious person. Just in what I know of you, over the last couple of years, getting to know you more and more through Toastmasters,
yeah,
and I think you are a very curious person, especially starting at a young age, right? Where this
yeah.
this curiosity of wanting to know how how a body works or how life works, and you took that
Mm.
to the nth degree, going and getting educated in medicine, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
You talked about your husband David,
Yes,
who is no longer with us,
right.
but it sounds like you two both were curious together in medicine and going through that path. But how did you met in medical school while you were going to medical school? But
No,
tell me
we
a little bit more about
actually
how you met.
we met in the snack bar at the college. As it turned out, David was a financial invested in the financial department,
Hmm.
And he wasn't that happy, but he stayed in that department until I met him. And then I kept watching him in the snack bar because he didn't live on campus like everybody else did. He drove back and forth to school. He was a, what do you call that? A substance student or something. Anyway, we met up in the snack bar. I kept watching him and checking him out because he looked like he was an interesting guy.
Okay.
And one of the times we were talking, he talked about opera, and I'm like, man, opera? You're an interesting guy. As it turned out, we started dating, and I have to say that we did a lot of superficial, just calm dating because he was a crazy guy and you never knew what was going to happen. For example, when we went to go to our first date at a movie theater, he had already told me that he was a poor student. And when we got up to the front desk to check into the movie theater, he said, "Oh, you have to pay for yourself because I can't afford to buy a ticket to the movie." And I'm like, well, that's good to hear because I'm going home. And I turned around and started home.
You
And
did.
I did. And he came after me and said, "I take it back. I take it back. I'll pay for you. I'll pay for you." Well, needless to say, that started a whole protocol for us of how do you manage each other and how do you get along. And it all had this wonderful sense of humor built into it, which is, and it had this idea that he simply did not really want to be in financial aid. And I finally told him, not financial aid, what am I trying to say?
Like financial advisor or
Yeah, or
something, or yeah,
that
just
department, the finance,
hmm.
the money department.
Sure.
Anyway, he simply didn't really want to be there anyway. He wanted to be in something that was a helpful profession. In fact, he went and took the psychological tests that say, yes, you should be helping people and not spending their money or whatever it is.
Okay.
So he found his way into that. And then together we finished college. We finished 1 year of college and then went on to medical school.
Wow. Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
That's neat. And were there a lot of synchronicities between you two, not just with kind of the humor, but were you both kind of, would you talk about medicine and have the same passions and
Oh, yeah.
desires about the same things?
Yes, and argue and disagree if we thought the other one was not making the right diagnosis or whatever. So we
Interesting.
studied together. We spent a lot of time together. In fact, after we were married a short while, we talked so much medicine that we finally laid down a rule that when you came home, you didn't talk medicine. You had to talk about opera or something else because we were so engaged in that love of taking care of people and seeing them get better or do well.
That's fascinating. I
Yeah,
I could absolutely see that, where you kind of bring your work home and that's all you talk about because that's what you're doing during the day. But I
exactly.
love that you guys made a rule to only talk about that stuff at work. And
Except when we were trying to raise our kids, they didn't get all those rules,
ah,
obviously. They got lots of different rules, so that
sure,
all fit into.
sure. So I want to talk about the adversity for you, and that's a big theme for the podcast is how people overcome adversity. And I think for you, one of the biggest challenges in your life was losing David. Would you agree?
Oh, that's a simply put. Thank you.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, David was, if you took him and put him in a package, he would be full of all the different extraneous, unpredictable, and unsuspecting stories, but all of them were based on his love of people and his love of practicing medicine. He was sometimes pretty raunchy. He was sometimes out of line. I'm glad he was in the 70s and not the 2025s
Okay.
because he was so crazy.
Okay.
And but together, I think I tuned him down a little bit so that he was able to still be himself. But now that I'm much older and looking back, I'm thinking maybe I didn't take care of myself as much as I should have
Mm.
because I found my investment in him was so dramatically important. He was always the guy who everybody came to or went to hear the stories, and I was the one who told them or who finished them up. And in the end, it turned out that now that after he died, I found myself telling his stories and not giving him credit for it finally, because now that I have succumbed to the whole issue of grief and having lost him, I now had the opportunity to see him in a reflective light that for me has been very growth producing and wonderful because I can share what he's done with other people.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And in that vein, or in that realm of grief and overcoming that, and I'm sure it was a battle. I'm sure it was very
Still
difficult.
is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Still
something
is.
that maybe you'll never ever get over.
Yeah, you don't get over grief.
Mhm.
No, you're right.
But how do you, so you are now working, you've kind of turned that grief into something productive in your work now today, and I think it's called Grief Share. Is
Yes.
that, can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
Grief Share is a wonderful international program designed to help people who are coping with grief and loved ones, anybody. And the program started about, I think, about 30 years ago in the U.S., and it's grown into a very supportive, helpful program. It's almost, I think sometimes we think of it as like being an AA meeting because we gather together people who've lost a loved one. We share our loss and we share with each other ways to deal with that loss. And most importantly, in the process of doing that, we're sharing. And that's really what it's all about. Not, oh, I know what you're going through. I've done that 1,000 times. It's, I'm here to help you understand how to cope with this because it's such a magnanimous occasion. And the program is a free program. So we started it at our church. In fact, we started it at our church when I was trying to figure out why is it that I thought I'd be fine dealing with losing David. After all, he was sick for 2 years, during which time I was his caregiver, and during which time we shared lots of important words. And here I was unable to cope with it. And with the help of the Grief Share program and other people in that program, I got the support and it helped me move on so that my grief is not predominantly dominating my life. My
Mhm.
grief is helping me move on and share it with many other people.
That's really powerful because
It's wonderful.
grief is, it can be devastating, and especially if you aren't maybe addressing it or acknowledging it in a proper
Exactly.
way, it can be
Yeah,
destructive.
absolutely.
And the fact that you have kind of worked towards not just overcoming it yourself, but now taking those lessons learned and sharing it with other people, I think is amazing.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's also a free program is very as well,
Yeah.
because
And
that's,
as a matter of fact, this was my 10th year of doing the program at our church.
wow.
I was like, oh my gosh, we've already put in 10 years. And that tells you something about the value of the program for
Yes.
people who are seeking support, and it works for everybody. It's an amazing program.
As a, so kind of as a maybe a leader or a mentor within that group, do you find that you still talk about David, and do you share as well, or are you a facilitator now at this point for
Oh,
the
I've been a
program?
facilitator the whole time because I
Hmm.
was the one who, with the
Started it.
pastor, we started it together,
Right.
and together we pretty much supported each other, fed into each other, did a wonderful job. Pastor Floyd was just really a superb facilitator with me, so he and I did the program for most of the time. Um, what was your question
Well,
now?
do you still, no, that's okay. Do you still share about
Oh,
David
I
in these
do. Well,
meetings?
and I have some of his crazy stories that I always have to share.
Okay.
And so I can't tell you ahead of time unless you're in the group. Even if you want to know what they are. Not
I
really.
was going to ask, but now you have to attend
You
a
have to
session
be
or a
in the
meeting
group.
to.
Not really, but so.
It's a good teaser though to get people to come, because honestly, grief has impacted so many people, and it
Oh,
could be
yes.
something as challenging as losing a job. Obviously, losing a
Absolutely.
partner or somebody in your family or somebody close to you is
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
creates a hole. But
Yeah. I think you could develop a whole podcast just working from the basis of grief and how that
Absolutely.
works. I'd love to share that with you
Yeah.
because it's just amazing how people's lives become more realistic and more livable because they have made that step.
Yeah. No, that's important. I think it is important to address it and to find ways to have it enable you to be a better person versus
Mm,
the alternative, which is, making you into a worse person, and
yeah.
you're living in the shadow of the grief, and yeah, all these things. No, I think there probably is a podcast or many podcasts out there about grief,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a great
I
idea.
actually did one.
You did really? Oh,
Yeah, I think that was one of them I did try.
oh, this
It's
is
a,
well, this is not your first podcast rodeo then. Okay. I
no,
was gonna say
no.
you're good at this. You seem like a natural anyway, so now it makes
Oh,
sense. You've done
uh-oh.
this before. I like that. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about back to the work that you were doing with the reservation, because that's a common theme for you, I think, Blair, is that you love helping people. It's who you were as a doctor working in medicine, but now you are wanting to reach out to a really underserved community with the Native American community. And so I guess talk to me a little bit about what that process was from going from Pennsylvania to the reservation, how you convinced David to do it, because I'm not sure that he might have been on the same page. Maybe he was, but I guess yeah, kind of walk me through the thought
How did
process.
I get there? Well,
Yeah.
whatever prompted us to make that move? Well, the first, I think I would say that the first and most important thing is that I had to convince David that my idea was good.
Mm-hmm.
At first, he said, "Oh, okay, we'll do it for 2 weeks." And then when they told us it was 2 years, not 2 weeks, he was a little more reluctant and he said, "Let me think on this a little more." But as it turned out, we talked about the advantages. We had 3 kids at that time, and we needed to educate them somehow.
Yeah.
We didn't do a good job on that. That's the one area that I probably should really have been told about way back then, because we could have had them homeschooled because we were living on the reservation. The kids were going to school on the reservation and they were not getting educated. We knew it well while they were going through it. In fact, when we moved back to Pennsylvania after that time, I went to the high school principal and said, "Could we move all our kids back a year?
Mm,
Because I know they're behind." And he refused to do it. And as a result, I think they've lost a lot of timing in their education.
sure.
They all had some additional schooling to go through to graduate adequately. So, but
Interesting.
at least we found the programs they could use and they could go back to. And my Matthew, who is the more serious, almost doesn't talk kind of son, said to me maybe 3 years ago or 5 years ago, I said, what do you think? You know, your parents take you to a reservation? That's the craziest thing. I was trying to get him to verbalize, which he never verbalizes. He said, "How many kids can tell you they've spent 2 years living on a reservation?" And I said, "You?" And he said, "That's why it's good." So for him, it was a good experience.
Mhm.
There were lots of tough times they went through. And I frequently tell the story of Heather. Do you want me to tell this story?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Heather came home from school the first week she was at the junior high school, and she came home with a bloody lip, and we're like, "What's going on?" "She beat me up, Mom. She beat me up. Look at this. You didn't. You told me it wouldn't happen." Well, we thought we told her that they wouldn't beat the kids up at school, but we didn't know wisely enough. As it turned out, her father said, "Okay, if that happens again, you beat them up. That's what you do." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. You turn the other cheek," which was my faithful Christian upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
speaking
Mm-hmm.
out very loudly, which she didn't hear very loudly. So as it turned out, she went back to school and the next day and she got beaten up. She came in the door screaming and yelling, "You did it. It's your fault because they came after me." "Who?" Those girls, they just came after me." And David said, "I told you, you beat them up. If they do it, they deserve it. You beat them up." And she said, I can't do that. And so he said, Bill was the cowboy we knew, are going to show you how to do that. So they taught her how to fight off
How to
people.
defend herself?
Yeah, they
Wow.
really
Okay.
literally did. A couple days later, she came home from school and she smiled. And I said, oh, now what? And she said, guess what? I beat her up. And it worked, Mom. Look, as it turned out, within a couple of weeks, she was on the girls' basketball team playing with the team from her high school right there on the reservation. So even though my Christian wise leadership did not work there, the whole thrust of the story was you can manage a life even if it looks impossible.
Sure.
Matthew had lots of fingers where the kids would take a pencil and stab it into your hand. They would put your hand down, and there was something the kids did for that. So there were a lot of things. Matthew is Mexican and Puerto Rican. We adopted him as a baby, and interestingly enough, he was dark skinned, dark haired. He looked a lot like the Navajo people, and I thought, oh, he'll have no problem. How naive. He'll have no problem. He looks like them.
Sure.
Not so. They knew better.
They knew he was an outsider.
So
Yeah.
that whole part of his life was a lot of learning and his learning experience. For us, it was all learning experience, and I cannot come up with a total explanation of why did I have to go to a reservation. But it was there in my package. And I think if God packs your package and helps you get it started, he's probably sitting there waiting for you to decide what to do with it. And even though you don't know why or how, you find some way to say, this is part of who I am.
Sure.
This is part of me. And it's part of me that needs to move on and contribute to the life that we've been created. Does that all make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely. I think that makes sense. It does.
It's and leaving the reservation was very complex because the person who had taken care of me helped me with all the reservation rules and all of the different cultural rules. Marie was my best friend, and she helped me through a lot of learning about the people. And she was always there with me when I had the first suicidal Indian kid. It was something that I had to learn what do I do, what do I don't do. And Marie was always there for me until the night that we were leaving to move back to Pennsylvania after 2 years on the reservation. I had a case come in of a lady who had pneumonia and died right there in front of me, and we didn't know what she died of. We had no idea what was going on. And I called the health department, and they said, take a biopsy of her lung and send it off immediately so we can analyze what it was. So we biopsied the lung, and I'm there for the first time in my life cutting pieces of lung out of a person, which was a total experience because she had died and she was only 30 years old.
Oh, wow.
So the whole trauma of doing that was there, and looking her with her children waiting there for her. I knew I had to stay on with that case. As it turned out, I sent the tissues away, and they told us the next morning that they couldn't find a diagnosis for her. And so in retrospect, I think it was the Gila virus that was a problem on the reservation in the 80s. But they said, you leave for home, you leave for home because you don't want to stay here in case all this stuff. And they gave us antibiotics and took care of us. So we left for home, and I called every day. Did you get any information? Do you have any answer of why this lady died? No, we don't have anything. What about Marie? Is she okay? Where is she? We haven't seen her since you saw her. So she had said hello to me the next morning. She had come up to me and said, I had a dream about you last night. And I said, oh, you did? And just that quick, she disappeared. I have not seen her since. That quick, she disappeared and did not tell me where she was going or if she was going or what was going on. I spent 6 months worrying that I was going to get some weird disease, first of all.
Yeah, of course.
And most importantly, I spent a lot of time trying to understand her culture. Was it in her culture that maybe she was just simply saying goodbye to me?
Mm.
And in retrospect, I think it may have been her way of saying goodbye and not contacting me ever again. So I learned a lot of cultural things.
Sure. That's
And
and sounds like Maria was Navajo then
yes,
as well.
yes,
Okay, so she was kind of helping you integrate into
right.
this new culture. But that is interesting that she came to you and said she had a dream about you. That was
Yeah,
the last interaction that you had with her, and you are kind of you still because we have talked about this before
yeah,
when we did our first round of the podcast, and you had mentioned this, and it would bug me to
mm,
never know what that dream was about or what it meant,
yeah,
and to your point, maybe that was just maybe you are some things are just we are meant to know,
right.
right? Which
And I learned that. It took me
takes
months
very
because I was looking for her for the longest time. I kept in touch with the people, and so if anybody heard that she was in town or anything, they would tell me because we all knew.
sure.
Yeah, I have a wonderful poem she wrote to me, so I have that's all still alive
That's good.
for
That's good. You
sure.
still have some amazing memories, obviously, from
Yeah,
this time period for you. But that unanswered question
yeah,
still nags. But again, coming to peace with the things that you may not know is also a big lesson learned for
yeah.
you. And I think you
Well
learned a
said.
lot of lessons
Yes.
out when you were doing this work. And this was in New Mexico?
New Mexico,
Yes.
Crown
Okay.
Point, New Mexico,
Okay.
about 60 miles from Gallup, New
Okay.
Mexico. So,
It's neat work. I love that it was purposeful work. You're out there as a physician helping take care of the population there
yeah.
on the reservation. I can imagine it was probably difficult because you are certainly an outsider coming in to their reservation, their place. A lot of people revere doctors as, very you would trust anything a doctor would say.
Not anymore.
But well, fact, absolutely.
Yeah.
But but it seems like you maybe didn't necessarily just have that instant respect from them when you walked in.
Oh, absolutely. The whole culture says they called us the dirty Beligana, which meant that we were bad people and we did bad people to them. But we did pretty well on our site because of my David being with his good sense of humor, and all the jokes would go through the hospital, which housed like 20 people, a small
Mhm.
facility. All the jokes would go through and change culture from one place to the next. Who stole your radio? The Navajo who stole your radio, the Spanish, they all had those jokes that they put those little lines in to make them laughable for sure.
That's neat.
Yeah, there were a lot of stories of, I had a woman who needed her gallbladder out. She was desperately in pain from having gallbladder pain. And I took her to the hospital and we got her all ready to have her gallbladder removed. And she developed an arrhythmia so that her heart went crazy, racing.
Oh,
And
wow.
they had to cancel her surgery. And she said to me after she came to my house about a week later and said, I need to tell you this. Do you know what happened when I was supposed to have that surgery? They wouldn't let me take my medicine bag into the operating room with me. They carry a little medicine bag. And when she went to go to the operating room, she had it in her hid in her hand. And they said, you can't take that in the operating room. They were not thinking, obviously.
Mm,
And as she went into the operating room, she developed an arrhythmia and they had to cancel the surgery.
wow.
And so she did not get her gallbladder removed. Fortunately, she did okay, but it was crazy because there she was, with this unbelievable. And she was a young woman, but
Hmm.
why did that happen at that moment? And she came to tell me, which I thought was pretty special. And we walked and talked through it.
That's powerful. I
Yeah.
think now because you're a physician, you believe in science, or at least I assume, as a
Yes, I'm in there.
and on the science camp. But there's also, I mean, unexplained things that can't be explained by science, and I mean that is also a scientific. Is there are things that you can't explain even with science. But how do you think that you accept some things that just can't be explained
Oh,
as
absolutely.
as a scientist,
Part
as
of
a
the
doctor?
reality of life. There's a whole part of life that we haven't even dealt with, I'm sure.
It's very
And
unknown.
I think there's the accessibility of stories to tell
Hmm.
that. And that reminds me, when you talk about stories to tell, how important they are. In fact, I was watching this morning on CBS News. They were talking to the women who, they were not African. They were the Afghanistan women. Apparently, a whole group of Afghanistan women have created a movie, and the movie just is coming out this weekend about Afghani women and how they have been treated and all of that. The most interesting thing they said about it while they were interviewing them was, we all have a story to tell. We have to have the opportunity to tell that story. And that's just what you're fulfilling by
Sure.
bringing these stories to people who, these Afghani women were apparently pulled off the street and taught, and they became teachers on the reservation, on their land.
In their villages, yes,
Yeah,
their tribes
yeah.
and stuff. Wow,
So
that's
I thought, gee
fascinating.
whiz, I think that's what we're talking
That's
about today.
absolutely, yes. We're here to
Yeah,
tell stories and
yeah,
share our thoughts on things, and we all have different experiences with life, and trying to hopefully cross-sect them a little bit just so we can understand there are some common threads amongst us all. And that's what I think I'm trying to pursue is what are some of those common threads? And I think sharing stories, communicating, right? We're
yes,
in Toastmasters. That's how we met, a
yes,
communication platform. It's so important to
yeah.
communicate and share those thoughts and those
Yeah,
stories. And
keep it up for
hmm
sure.
thank
Yeah,
you. I appreciate it. I will. I
that's
absolutely will.
really
I
important.
I wanted to ask you, I've been curious about this with practicing medicine, and you mentioned this because you had to perform a biopsy on someone who was now no longer alive.
Right,
And you had said it was kind of a traumatic experience for you. Maybe not the actual process of getting the biopsy, but just you had
the
you
whole
had no
dynamic.
answers. It
Yeah.
was the dynamic of it was really challenging. But do you find that and you can only speak for yourself, I suppose, but do doctors experience some trauma because they're dealing with so many people who are sick, so many people who are suffering, and
Hmm.
I have to assume that you might absorb some of
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Does that happen?
Oh yeah. Sure. Lots of those stories stay by and go with you as you, particularly if you have a way of connecting to that story. I'll never forget that one of my first cases as an intern was taking care of a man who was very fragile, like 90, very fragile, and he, excuse me, was had an arrhythmia, and it was the kind of arrhythmia of your heart that you don't usually survive from, at least not in the 70s,
Okay.
where it was before we had anything like lidocaine and all of
Mm-hmm.
those things available. And as it turned out with this particular man, he was kept getting the arrhythmia, and he looked up to me and he said, "Am I going to die this time?" And I said, "You know, you may, because we don't have any way to get rid of this arrhythmia, except I'm going to look something up." Well, as it turned out, I had the last month's journal, and it introduced lidocaine and said it was frequently used for arrhythmias at that time. And I said to my resident, "Let's give this guy some of this lidocaine. It looks like it helps some people." And she said, "Well, where did you get that information?" And I said, "I just saw it in this journal from last month. It's brand new news. He's going to die." She said, "Oh, well, let's try it." Well, we tried it, and his arrhythmia cleared immediately. And
Really?
we're like cheering and cheering. And he sat up and said, "Beat you again, didn't I?"
Ah,
And we said, "Oh my God, never think that that experience would come to you." But
yeah, sure.
it was a brand new drug, and I happened to see the article about it, and my resident said, "Sure, let's try it."
Yeah,
So that was a long time ago.
sure. Back when yeah, when you were an intern, but
Yeah.
sometimes it feels like just yesterday, right? You
Oh
can
yeah.
recall those moments. What for you would be one of the biggest moments in your life? And I know that's a really maybe hard question to ask, but because you have to pick one. But for you, what would you say would be the biggest happiest moment in your life?
Probably connecting with David would be a really just having the opportunity to have that relationship and to grow in that relationship was so valuable for me.
Hmm.
So I think that's probably where I would go.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, probably.
That's a good answer because otherwise you would have had to have said one of your kids being born, and then the other kids would have been jealous because you only picked one. but but
Exactly.
no,
Yeah.
I think that's neat, and I want to understand for you, how long were you married to David?
How long?
How long were you married or together? It doesn't even have to be married, but just
Uh,
together, approximately.
you're asking for a number. And then I met him and married him in 60. Oh, I don't know. I can't think right now.
Oh, that's okay.
61 was high school.
Okay.
65 was college. 69 was medical school. And I met him just before medical school. So
Okay.
69 till,
Till
does
today.
that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, sure. So,
I'm
70,
not good at putting
30,
numbers
50.
together.
So you were together and but he passed away 10 years ago?
Yeah,
Okay.
9 years.
So you were together for about 40
Yeah,
years ish. Okay.
yeah.
Now, the reason I ask that is the number was really arbitrary, but with that amount of time, do you have any advice, relationship advice for anybody out there who's, what does it take to be together for 40 years?
A lot of courtesy and a lot of patience, a lot of um, to be with someone a long time means you define what happiness is in your relationship. I think you have to define what does it what does how does what role does it fit? How does it fit? And you have to know that there are things that you just simply can't change or make a difference in. Mhm. I think that kind of is the basis of what it is. You decide to put up with a lot of stuff you never thought you would. That's all. But you also learn that you can grow from every single one of those situations. I think. Does that come close?
I like that. No, I think that's great. I think you are absolutely right. It does take a lot of commitment to compromising
Mm.
and being okay with them as who they are. And I would imagine that you guys changed a lot over the course of many years, right? You were not the same person you are today versus the person when you met
Pretty
each other,
close,
right?
though. I would
Really?
say pretty
Okay.
close. I don't think that. I feel like we didn't change that much. I'll have to think more on that, but I think who we defined as who we were and who we are pretty much the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I keep trying to think. Just this week after you called me one day last week, I got this message on Facebook from a woman who said, "I was dear Dr. Blair. I was in the library this weekend, and I picked up a book." And someone else looked at me and said, "Oh, do you know her?" And she said, "Who?" And she turned a book around, and it was the book I wrote. And she said, "Oh, I sure do. She took me through a divorce and all kind of complications." How many years ago was that? That was more than 30 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I've gotten several of those messages. It's
I
fascinating.
love that.
And so she texted me and said, I got to read your book. Oh my gosh. That was a long time ago. And she said how much she really enjoyed it and thanked me again for what I helped her with back whenever. So when that
When she was going
happens,
through that,
that's
yeah.
why having the websites, probably the places to talk are good.
The social media sites
Yeah,
for, yeah,
yeah.
just connecting with people you haven't connected
Yeah,
with in a really
I've
long
had
time.
I've had that happen several. Where they come upon one of my books, or they they've met somebody who knew me or some such thing.
I like that.
So it's very rich blessing.
It is neat because it's been so many years and you hear from this person and you made an impact on them.
Yeah.
And maybe you didn't even realize it at the time,
Yeah,
but
at the
they've
time
reached out to you
yeah.
much, much later in life.
Yeah, it was good. It was fun. So I have several patients who just keep me up on what's going on.
That's hilarious.
Get a card every so
I
often.
love that. That's neat.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you still get people asking you medical advice or
I
not
I
really?
ha I shut down as soon as we were out of practice. I pretty much shut down answering questions
Okay.
because I found they all have the same question, but they don't have the same answer. And it's a difficult arena to move into because everyone nowadays is an expert.
Hmm.
So
Yes, thanks to Google, right?
yeah. So I found that to be something I would avoid more than I would deal with. And whenever I slip into consulting, I say to myself, "Stop that! You'll get in trouble." So yeah, I don't do too much with that.
No, that's okay. I was just curious if people would still come to you and ask you
Yeah.
questions, but you just say, I don't practice anymore. So,
Well, I always tell, like at Toastmasters, the first time I told this, it was really crazy. I I had one of the Toastmasters. He goes way back. He came in and said, was introducing people. Let's see if I can put it in the right order. And he stood up in front and was introducing, and he introduced me, I guess. And then he said, "And you're a doctor, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, and if you want to take off your shirt and pull your pants down, I'll do your exam while we're here." And he got so embarrassed. He didn't know what to do with himself. He turned bright red and left the stage. So I only had to tell it once.
that's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah,
Still keeping people on their toes. I
yeah,
love that.
uh-huh,
Blair, you are
yeah, that was,
you're funny.
that's great.
Now, I want to ask you about your life now and some of the challenges that you're dealing with now, which would be related to, I guess, some of your health. You've always been a pretty healthy
Yeah.
person. You've lived a healthy life, or at least got fortunate to have a pretty healthy life. But where are you at today, and what concerns or what keeps you up at night?
Nothing keeps me up.
You sleep
I
good?
sleep.
Okay.
My body, I think it's probably part of the experiencing it because sleep is one of the common things. Hello? Is somebody,
Oh yeah, I think somebody was just at your door
uh,
dropping off a
did they leave?
landscaping thing. Yeah.
Oh,
You know how the
okay.
guys stop by and they'll put a little landscaping
Of
advertisement or
course.
business card.
Yeah.
I think that's what he was
Well,
doing.
they didn't say anything. So
Yes.
let's see, where were we here?
Well, so I wanted to kind of understand because you had recently kind of given a speech about dementia and memory and something that you were kind of battling through and what's that like now that you're older and you feel like your body may be betraying you or
Ooh, that's
something.
good. Yeah.
What is this like now?
Well, I think part of the problem is that something was going on with my mind and body for a couple of months, and I couldn't seem to find somebody to really understand what was going on. I was having depression that I had not had. I was having stiffness in my legs. You can see, I have a tremor. That's the first symptom of anything, and these didn't fit together for a diagnosis. And after I struggled with it, reading and asking questions, I decided maybe I was getting, what's the disease?
Dementia?
No,
Parkinson's?
Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
My mind deliberately erases Parkinson from any conversation. I
Mm.
have to ask somebody else what it is. I think that has some implications, but I'm not sure what they are.
Yeah, or maybe you just, yeah, it's
I just,
a trauma or the idea of having it and you just don't want to think about it. So therefore it
exactly.
does not
And my brain puts it
blocks
away,
it.
and then I have to say, Michael, the guy who has the things in his head, and he was in Back to the Future, that movie, and then I finally find out who it is.
Sure.
But so anyway, I went to the a neurologist, and between you and me, it was a woman,
Hmm.
and I don't think she was ready to handle it with me, or I don't know what. I thought maybe it was because I was a physician and she was a physician, because she just kind of she almost literally leaned back and said, "Go away." It's kind of what I thought. She didn't really give me any answers,
Mm.
and I might maybe it's interesting because she knew I was a physician, because the next doctor I went to made a big deal about me because I was an MD and I had been married to a DO. And of course, if you know anything about licensure, that's a big it's a
Hmm.
big no-no kind of concept.
Yes, of course.
So David was the DO who made everybody think that he was taking care of the doctor of obstetrics. So he was really not, but he delivered a lot of babies, which was no fault or anything with
Sure.
that. So anyway, I was having trouble getting somebody to talk to me. And I was same thing I was hearing from patients and people on the street and in the neighborhood very heavily. So it's not just me, I think. So then I went to another neurologist and I said, "Can we put this list together? I have this, I have this, I have this." He said, "Well, let's watch it. Do you want to try some medicine that works for Parkinson's disease?" I said, "Well, I'll give it a try. I'm not terribly distressed by the tremor. I can live with that. I guess other people are bothered by it more than I
Mm.
am."
Hmm.
And so he said, "I'll give you this prescription and we'll try that. Do some scans." The scans said clearly I don't have Alzheimer's. That's not in the package. The scan said that I had, some mixed up cells, so that for some reason I can't remember words when I go to say things.
Sure.
They're blank. That's been a real issue. And the stiffness is a strange thing because it's hard going up and down steps. Your body, it's called a movement disorder.
Okay.
So you have trouble making your legs and arms work and more prone to falling. So
Interesting.
if you see older people who are falling, that might be part of the
Could be a
problem.
reason why.
And it might be what I have. So the dementia part, actually, I think I got better
Hmm.
after I mean, there for a while when I got up at Toastmasters, I heard myself mix up a sentence, and it happened. I have Renee on guard now. She has to tell me if I'm missing sentences or words.
Okay.
So if I start really getting prevalent with it, then that's not the correct use of prevalent. But when I start getting more used to it, I'll be better prepared to say I'm sitting down now. So,
I'm gonna tap out and gather my thoughts.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah. So
sure.
so I'm at a point now where I feel like I can manage. I can
Hmm.
actually get along. I can live alone for right now. Um, but what's up? Who knows?
Yeah, well, just one day at a time, right? I mean,
Yeah,
no tomorrow is promised anyway, so
yeah.
why worry about it, right?
That's exactly right. So I'm trying to figure out how I can do that all. So I'm taking my two grandchildren to Florida to Disney in next week. So, and the one
Okay,
grandchild, Aaliyah, the older grandchild, has said to me, "I'll stay with you and take care of you, Mimi. Don't worry." Because I kept saying, "What if I get lost? What if you lose me at the park? What are you going to do if I don't know where I am?" And so I gave him this whole list of things, and they said, "You're in good hands. Don't worry." So
okay.
Christian he just got a job there like 2 months ago.
Yes, I remember you had said
Talking
that he's
about it.
working at Disney now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
so
love that.
so
That's
he's
neat.
still working, so
Hmm.
I don't know. They apparently it's like a trial program where you go in and they watch you and you watch them, and If they want you, they offer you a job, and if they don't, you go home.
Okay. Well, that'll be a really special trip for
Yeah,
you to go to Disney and spend time with your family.
yeah,
You had mentioned it's interesting to me the dichotomy now of you have people, you spent your entire life taking care of people, and now you have people wanting to take care of you.
yeah.
Is that hard?
Yes.
Is it? Okay.
How do you define what? Yeah, yeah. I haven't gotten that figured out yet. Although Christian's probably been the best one with it. Months and months ago, if he and I were going out of a restaurant, he would always be right there at my arm in case I tripped or something, because he
Hmm.
did catch me a couple times when I was having this tripping over the curb thing.
Sure.
So he already is kind of tuned into it, which is to my advantage,
Yeah,
and I'll
that's
learn
good.
from him.
If you could give advice to somebody younger than you, any bit of advice, what would that be?
At Toastmasters, what did I word did I use? Calm.
Yes. Hmm.
Just thought of that. Yeah, I
Hmm.
used the word be calm.
Yeah.
Um, a word. I think the calm would fit there, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that before, but it just came. Huh.
There's a there was a saying or a slogan probably 10 years ago. You might have heard it or seen it. It was on t-shirts and everything for a long time, and it was keep calm and carry on. And that was a mantra for a lot of people, and I think that that fits here
Yeah.
is just keep calm and carry on. Like
Yeah.
don't let things bother you. I like that.
Keep calm and carry on. That's viable.
I also like you gave a speech about smile and I
When
think
you took the pencil in the bathroom.
yes, I think it was a great. So Blair had actually I'd love to have you maybe just give us a quick highlight of that speech if you can if you remember it. I don't have a pencil, but the neat thing about it was is that you took that pencil and you encouraged everybody to put it in their mouth, and it would kind of force you to smile because it's a silly action in the first
Yes.
place, putting a pencil in your mouth, and then the fact that it made you smile. It kind of forced you to smile.
Right.
And I believe your whole speech was about just smiling back at people, acknowledging them and making
Yeah.
them feel noticed, and smiling versus just looking at them. That's one way to know somebody, but actually noticing them and smiling, it's a connection, and it connects you. And I also would say that that's something that I took away from that speech was, and I
Good.
still think about it to this day. And once in a while, I will put a pencil in my mouth because of that
Smile
speech.
up here,
Yeah,
Deb.
but it was really neat. And so that was something I was curious if you were going to say when I asked you, what advice could you give, other people out there is
Smile.
smile more.
It's simple.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's an easy, free gift to give, which I think was also
Yeah.
your kind of your one of your closing statements. But well, Blair, I appreciate you sitting down with me to kind of talk through just some of the things that you've experienced in life, and I'm sure we'll probably have to do another version, just to catch up and see where you are, in 6 months to a year, and obviously sit down and talk about more things about life.
Great.
But I did want to ask you one last question
Oh,
before I
one
let you
last.
go. And this one, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. But I want to understand, because this is a question I ask every single one of my guests. What do you think makes a person legendary?
Oh, I think what makes them legendary is the person who is watching that person finds great enrichment in their own life as a result of that person's presented life. Does that catch it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not about me that's legendary. What's legendary is what you carry to me for me to enrich and grow with. Got it?
I love
You
that.
buy that?
I totally bought that. Yeah.
Okay. You have to write it down for me. I forgot it
No,
already.
I think it's neat because I think what you have said is that a person isn't legendary because of things that they are doing for
Right.
themselves, but the things that they're providing to other people. And the more that you can provide to other people, I think the more legendary you become, right? And I think that that's powerful. I love that. And again, there was no right answer. I just wanted to get your take, and everybody has a different
Are
answer
you
on.
going to ask John Legend
Yeah,
if
yeah,
he
yeah.
fits?
That would be an amazing guest to have on the Legends of
Yeah,
Vegan podcast.
because
100%.
that's it. That's up his park and place, I
Absolutely.
think.
Yes.
Yeah.
But no, well said. I appreciate that, Blair. Thank you. Well, yes, that's it, Blair. I appreciate your willingness to sit down again. I know it was kind of a lot of random questions and just storytelling, but it was really neat.
Exhausting.
Yeah, yeah, you need a nap. I
I
might
need
need
a
a nap too.
massage.
Yeah. But thank you so much. It was really great to, yeah, just to chat and understand a little bit more about your life,
Well, it's
the
been
things that
wonderful
you
for
have
me.
you have
Keep it up.
experienced. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I've really enjoyed it, and I didn't mess up too many sentences
You
to have.
did amazing. You actually, I think
That's
you did
good.
better the second time than the first time.
Oh,
So
good.
yeah, you
Okay.
did wonderful. But well, that's perfect. Well, I'm gonna close it out then. Thanks
Okay.
everybody for watching, and I appreciate you tuning in once again to the Legends of Vegan podcast. Stay tuned for more. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video series, and let me know if you know of somebody you'd like to nominate to be a legend. That's it. Thanks so
Thank
much for watching.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Blair.
you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.